तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत् तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत् तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत् ॐ आनन्दमयी चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे ॐ आनन्दमयी चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे Open my mind, my heart, my life to your light, your love, your power in all things. May I see the divine. Open my mind, my heart, my life to your light, your love, your power in all things. May I see the divine. Shri Aravinda Sharanam Mama. Shri Aravinda Sharanam Mama. Shri Aravinda Sharanam Mama.
Welcome everyone. Let us start. So we were on this chapter, chapter 9, and the synthesis of yoga, the release from the ego. And I think we have to start from 358 here. Yeah. So anyone who would like to begin the reading for us today, you're welcome to do so. Yeah, we'll see if we want to maybe stop in the middle of this paragraph somewhere or maybe take it full as you go ahead. So please.
Yeah, Monica, I'll read.
Yes, please.
But this cosmic self is spiritual in essence and in experience. It must not be confused with the collective existence, with any group soul, or the life and body of a human society, or even of all mankind. The subordination of the ego to the progress and happiness of the human race is now a governing idea in the world's thought and ethics. But this is a mental and moral and not a spiritual ideal. For that, progress is a series of constant mental, vital, and physical vicissitudes. It has no firm spiritual content and offers no sure standing ground to the soul of man. The consciousness of collective humanity is only a larger comprehensive edition or a sum of individual egos made of the same substance in the same mold of nature. It has not in it any greater light, any more eternal sense of itself, any purer source of peace, joy, and deliverance. It is rather even more tortured, troubled, obscured, certainly more vague, confused, and unprogressive. The individual is in this respect greater than the mass and cannot be called on to subordinate his more luminous possibilities to this darker entity. So I'll go.
Yes, please,
If
you can continue.
if light, peace, deliverance, a better state of existence are to come, they must descend into the soul from something wider than the individual, but also from something higher than the collective ego. Altruism, philanthropy, the service of mankind are in themselves mental or moral ideals, not laws of the spiritual life. If into the spiritual aim there enters the impulse to deny the personal self or to serve humanity or the world at large, it comes not from the ego nor from the collective sense of the race, but from something more occult and profound, transcendent of both these things. For it is founded on a sense of the divine in all, and it works not for the sake of the ego or the race, but for the sake of the divine and its purpose in the person or group or collective. It is this transcendent source which we must seek and serve, this vaster being and consciousness to which the race and the individual are minor terms of its existence.
Thank you, Shasad.
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah, any thoughts, anyone? So I think maybe we can take it bit by bit, what Shadadi has just said. So it's a good clarification, I think, for all of us, because at times we may feel that if one is talking of, since we have no idea what is cosmic self, we may think that what is collective self, collective ego consciousness, that is the cosmic consciousness, that which each one of us largely is thinking and living, how we are living. So he says that, but this cosmic self is spiritual in essence and in experience, and it must not be confused with the collective existence. So there is something called collective consciousness. We may have heard this name, and often we talk about, that when, for example, we go to malls or places like markets and where there is like a lot of consumerism, since most of the egos are wanting to consume, that's a collective consciousness, collective existence. But that is not what is meant by cosmic sense. So I think it's a good clarification for us to understand before we have truly realized the cosmic self, what it is. So, but this cosmic self is spiritual in essence and in experience. It must not be confused with the collective existence, with any group soul, or the life and body of a human society, or even of all mankind. So then there are cultural consciousness, like India's consciousness, and even smaller groups like religions, they have a collective consciousness. Then little cities, towns, villages, they may have a collective consciousness. So he says that this is not talking about that when we talk of cosmic self. The subordination of the ego to the progress and happiness of human race is now a governing idea. How we can see it very easily, like how we usually get educated in our times. It was like, okay, what is in demand? More doctors, more engineers. So what do you study? You, whether you want it or not want it, you become a doctor or an engineer. Why? Because it's in demand. So he's saying that the subordination of the ego to the progress and happiness of human race is now a governing idea in the world's thoughts and ethics, but this is a mental and moral and not a spiritual ideal. So because there is a cultural consciousness which says, okay, females have to get married, they can't remain unmarried, or they have to bear this many children. So that is collective idea, that mental and moral notion. This is not a cosmic self. For that, progress is a series of constant mental, vital, physical vicissitudes. Why? Because you are sacrificing your lower self, the ego consciousness, for something which is like, although it's bigger than you, but it's actually collective ego existence, collective thought, collective humanity, how it is thinking. So you are sacrificing yourself for so that the society may remain and its values may be taken forward. So he says that for that progress is a series of a constant mental, vital, and physical vicissitudes. It has no firm spiritual content, nothing really, substantial like you look up to, and offers no sure standing ground to the soul of man. So one is very unsure that even if you give up yourself for the sake of what society wants from an individual, if there is no possibility or there is no surety that the society will stand back with you if you give up if you sacrifice your uh, self for the sake of this collective ego. The consciousness of collective humanity is only a larger, comprehensive addition or a sum of individual egos. So, what is it? My ego, yes, it's big enough. And then there is collective ego. So, usually I serve my ego. Now I am being asked to sacrifice my ego and to serve the collective ego. It's actually one and the same. Nothing has changed. We are serving the egos. So, the consciousness of collective humanity is only a larger, comprehensive addition or a sum of individual egos. And I think if we look at our lives, we will see that how, not even consciously, like a default process, it is like a unsaid fact that an individual ego has to live for the society ego or the collective ego. We may have taken many decisions based on that satisfaction of that collective ego. Maybe at times we may dress so that people may be satisfied, bear children, get married, or maybe we may be not feeling the gender that we are bodily and yet pretend that I am that gender so that I can satisfy a collective ego. So this is how it becomes like a series of mental, vital, physical vicissitudes. So the consciousness of collective humanity is only a larger addition or a sum of individual egos, made of the same substance, in the same mold of nature. It has not in it any greater light, any more eternal sense of itself, any purer source of peace, joy, and deliverance. And that is why those of us who do at times in their life, they sacrifice their individual demand of the ego to a collective consciousness. we see that even that then we remain really empty-handed. There is nothing that is given to us after that sacrifice, which we did not want to make in the very first place. We felt compelled to make because that's the demand, and we never questioned that we have any other option. So it doesn't give us any greater light, no eternal sense of itself, and it doesn't deliver peace, joy, and deliverance from the little me. It is rather even more tortured, troubled, and obscured, and very rigid also. We see why so much in trouble and darkness, because it's very rigid. Religious ego, cultish ego, we see how rigid it is, very dogmatic. Even punishment can be done if the person is not agreeing to those commandments. You are made to believe like a sinner. You are a sinner if you are not agreeing to what collective ego is saying of your culture or the place. So it is rather even more a tortured, troubled, and obscured, certainly more vague, confused, and unprogressive. So whenever we become too rigid, dogmatic, full of rules, regulations, we stagnate. We are not progressive. So that's why, he uses the word unprogressive. And we see this all around us and in us also at times, that when we become too rigid about our beliefs, opinions, ideas, even as a family, then we may become, or as a society, or any governing body. So whenever this rigidity or dogma is there, then we become unprogressive. Receptivity is not there. The individual is in this respect greater than the mass and cannot be called. Now he talks about this cosmic self, what he was sharing earlier. The individual in this respect is in this respect greater than the mass. Imagine. Usually we think that, oh, what are you? You can be sacrificed for what the society wants from you. But he says the individual is in this respect greater than the mass and cannot be called on to subordinate his more luminous possibilities to this darker entity. If light, peace, deliverance, a better state of existence are to come, they must descend into the soul from something wider than the individual, but also from something higher than the collective ego. I think these really very promising again, these lines. Altruism, philanthropy, the service of mankind are in themselves mental or moral ideas, not laws of spiritual life. If into the so usually we say that okay, you be selfless and just serve uh, whatever the religion may demand, the collective humanity may demand. So he says that altruism, philanthropy, the service of mankind are in themselves mental or moral ideals, not laws of spiritual life. If into the spiritual aim there enters the impulse to deny the personal self or to serve humanity or the world at large, it comes not from the ego nor from the collective sense. So there would be a natural impulse, not like people are saying that you have to do this, that on the spiritual path there comes a natural impulse. It may come, not for everyone, at one or the other point of time, to deny self-abnegation, what Mother writes in prayers and meditation, to deny the personal self or to serve humanity or the world at large. Then this would come not from the ego nor from the collective sense of the race. So this is what that when there is a connection with the higher of the individual, then one gets the guidance, whatever is necessary for the path, one is compelled to do that. So that may be altruism, philanthropy, or anything, but that would be not coming from this collective sense of the race or ego, but from something more occult, profound, transcendent of both these things, collective ego and collective sense of race, for it is founded on a sense of divine in all, and it works not for the sake of the ego or the race, but for the sake of the divine and its purpose in the person or group or collective. So, not that I want to serve my religion, my country, not from that. Since one sees, and practically it's a realization that you feel that, yes, that this is why I have to serve. And not coming from a many mental notion, but from a practical self realization. Then it's the true altruism. But it's not to satisfy any collective ego. It is this transcendent source. So now he tells us that for whom we should be the servants. It is not for any collective ego, not for your family, not for your parents, not like if you are compelled to do so. It is this transcendent source which we must seek and serve, this vaster being and consciousness to which the race and the individual are minor terms of its existence. So, in front of serving that transcendent source, individual, race, they are very, like minor components. Yes. So, I just shared when I was reading, my reflections on it, and please, you're welcome to share anything that is coming up. Yeah. So, I think it's a good a kind of clarification for us when we don't know what cosmic self is, and we may think that is cosmic self this consciousness which we collectively have, but he is clarifying that no, that's not it. It's a spiritual cosmic consciousness and not our collective ideas, dogmas, and rigidity. Yes, anyone? Anything here?
Yeah, this part was very, I mean, one has felt it again and again, and yet to see it in writing was pretty, I mean, I just, this way, the single is actually much more important than the individual is in this respect greater than the mass and cannot be called on to subordinate his more luminous possibilities to this darker entity. I mean, this is going quite opposite to how I would say one is perceived to view the society or to the world, right? It's always like if you see any, I don't know, even any movie or any serials, like the bent is that you don't matter, right? For the greater good, for the greater good. But if the greater good is true, like it's so beautifully clarified, then it's not the individual greater group. It's not the individual sacrifice. It comes from somewhere else, right? It's just a higher thing flowing to you. But what we do in the name of greater good, like I really like this darker entity thing. Like it feels wrong, right? We have felt it so many times, and yet there seems to be kind of a revolt, internal revolt. Your being wants to do something else. Yes, this is not what you're supposed to do, suppose, because for, so many different reasons, and yet to see that, yes, the individual is in this respect greater than the mass. I mean, this in itself is very, I would say, like contradictory, controversial, rather, like I could use more words or adjectives. The individual is in this respect greater than the mass and cannot be called on to subordinate his more luminous possibility to this darker entity. And if we look at history, whenever it has changed, right? Like whenever some movement has happened, some anything, so there are individual people who have stood up and said, not anymore, right? And that has changed the course of like millions of lives. So this has been proven, and yet somehow still internally it's not accepted. So it was really very like revelatory for me to see this written the way it is. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
On the same note, I think we somehow, since we are born into so much of ignorance, darkness, we this ability to use our discernment, I think it must be maybe it can be. I think that's what we do in this semi-alternative or the other schools, where we have a different vision that the individual light that has to be continuously preserved. And even if a child is like very young, he has a knowing which has to be cultivated. I think in our regular earlier, that's how the British like took over India. That's what they say, that they hit at the root of Indian strength, which was our Gurukul system or the education system, where this is what exactly, what you were pointing at. This is what was the center, the individual enlightenment was the center of that education. And we broke that, we Britishers like hit at the root of it and entered into such an education that we have been carrying still so far, which is like subject oriented and hardly any focus on who is the one who is studying, so that we can continue to cultivate that knowing capacity which knows, okay, do I want to be a slave to this one, or do I want to be a servant of something different? So that discerning, as you said very rightly, that we all the time we may have actually succumbed to this collective humanity, all of us at various times, but something did not feel right. But now looking back, we can say that why did we question, that no, why didn't we have faith that no, something is not right? So I can pause here, I can hold, I don't have to go with the flow. So I think maybe that confidence would come when it is a part of my cultivation process during childhood, that yes, I can have faith on this inner light which is always there if only I pay attention. So this discerning ability. Yeah. So anything more here before we move to the next one? Okay, so taking it as a clue to move forward. So we'll take this one then, next bit. Yeah, anyone who feels ready.
Yeah, I'll read. There is indeed a truth behind the pragmatic impulse which an exclusive, one sided spirituality is apt to ignore or deny or belittle. It is this that, since the individual and the universal are terms of that higher and vaster being, their fulfillment must have some real place in the supreme existence. There must be behind them some higher purpose in the supreme wisdom and knowledge, some eternal strain in the supreme delight. They cannot have been, they were not created in vain. But the perfection and satisfaction of humanity, like the perfection and satisfaction of the individual, can only be securely compassed and founded upon a more eternal yet unceased truth and right of things. minor terms of some greater existence, they can fulfill themselves only when that of which they are the terms is known and possessed. The greatest service to humanity, the surest foundation for its true progress, happiness, and perfection is to prepare or find the way by which the individual and the collective man can transcend the ego and live in its true self, no longer bound to ignorance, incapacity, disharmony, and sorrow. It is by the pursuit of the eternal and not by living bound in the slow collective evolution of nature that we can best assure even that evolutionary, collective, altruistic aim our modern thought and idealism have set before us. But it is in itself a secondary aim to find, know, and possess the divine existence, consciousness, and nature, and to live in it. For the divine is our true aim and the one perfection to which we must aspire.
So I think we also, a bit before we came to something like this, also where he was sharing, maybe in this or somewhere else, that even if, let's say, that the individual also has to be satisfied and the collective has to be satisfied, without that ultimate satisfaction in the divine, that also cannot happen. So we were reading it somewhere that even if we say that the ego wants to be happy, the ego wants to be fulfilled, that cannot happen without that the true aim that he's mentioning towards the end. So here he says that, let's take it from the starting, bit by bit. There is indeed a truth behind the pragmatic impulse, which an exclusive one-sided spirituality is apt to ignore or deny or belittle. And it is this, that since the individual and the universal are terms of that higher and vaster being, their fulfillment must have some real place in the supreme existence. So the individual and universal are not created just like that, like, okay, remain empty and, just roam around like that. So he says that it is this, that since the individual, everything is made in the image of the divine. So since the individual and the universal are terms of that higher and vaster transcendent being, their fulfillment must have some real place in supreme existence. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि उसके बारे में सोचा नहीं गया. And this is just my reflection on it. There must be behind them some higher purpose, some high purpose in the supreme wisdom and knowledge, some eternal strain in the supreme delight. They cannot have been, they were not created in dream. So the very fact that we are feeling like little separate individual selves, or even as a collective ego, we still feel so little. It must have a purpose, he says. It's not that you are born just like that. But the perfection and satisfaction of humanity, like the perfection and satisfaction of the individual, now he's addressing what he has just said, can only be securely compassed and founded upon a more eternal yet unceased truth and the right of things. Truth and right. Satyam Ritam Brihat. As he mentions somewhere else. Satyam, truth. Ritam is right. All of us want to do right. How to do that right? You connect yourself to that truth consciousness. Only then we can make the right action. Satyam Ritam Brihat. That's the quality of true consciousness. Brihat is vastness, wideness, flexibility, suppleness. So that is the quality of what he says here, truth and right of things. So even if we want collective and individual satisfaction, that can only be found on this Satyam and Ritam, not anywhere else. Minor terms of some greater existence. So the universal and individual are minor terms of the transcendent. So minor terms of some greater existence, they can fulfill themselves only when that of which they are the terms. So they are the terms of the divine. They are the terms of the transcendent divine. Only when that of which they are the terms is known and possessed. So even if we go to the, like we can see, for example, if like we have families, we have structures, organizations, then we have countries, and then we have individuals. Now, if I say that I want a beautiful country, a country which is in true harmony, true connectedness, and whatever, the best that we can envisage, it cannot be possible that an individual level remains rubbish and that the country can be that grand. It's not possible. So it's like almost I can see that kind of a ladder, that if the individual is want is like all of us want fulfillment, is to have any fulfillment, it must possess that true source of which it is the part. Known and possessed. That's why we place in Indian culture, we place so much of importance, although it has been a bit lost somewhere and become maybe a different kind of a fashion. So much of emphasis on self-realization. And that was, I believe that was what made India India, because there was so much emphasis on individual self-realization. That's what was happening in our even Gurukuls of earlier times. So without that, he says that true satisfaction is not possible that we are seeking. Yeah, anything here? We can take a break here.
Yeah, a small comment. This, where it says there must be behind them some high purpose. Like since childhood, I would say that this thing that there has to be some better reason, right? Some purpose to this. The reason why, say, if I'm talking about myself, why I was born. Like this thing, how it's not given any value in society as such. And the regular, just education, eating, sleeping, health, how much, I mean, that's all we are, right? That's all we do. And even this, just this, little light of there must be some higher purpose, there must be, like the fact that it's not in our everyday inculcated a little bit in most households or in most individuals is surprising, considering we don't know where we are coming, we don't know where we are going, and what we are doing doesn't seem to be taking us anywhere if we actually pause and see. Although, small accomplishments, another child added to the family or another house added, they seem to be some milestones. But in the big picture, what is happening? Where is one going and why? Where is one coming from and why again? So this must be some higher purpose. I mean, must be whatever we do. I mean, I brush my teeth so that the teeth can be healthy and I would not have to, go to a dentist and have some cavity or something. Like there's always a reason, and we know that we are intellectual beings, most of all mental beings. And yet, this question is not a regular question. Like, if three, four friends are just casually sitting, this is not a question that would in general come, right? Like cricket, news, disaster, investments. I mean, that's very normal. And yet, why is this not there? A little bit even. And it's always shirked away. हाँ होगा होगा, but अभी ये ले तो ये तो खा. That the importance of this question is, I mean, it's highly important, and yet it's not seen more and more and more. And maybe it's seen, I don't know, but just wanted to say.
So I think it's very valid because since we are when you were sharing, it was coming to me the word darker entity. That darker entity prevails. So that even in my discussion, what you were sharing, it's either about news or roti, kapra or makan or property and wealth. Because the darkness, that's the journey. The journey is from darkness to light. And that is why right now, I think it's only right now, it's not very common, as you rightly said, to have these discussions like somebody is, chit-chatting at the corner of the street and talking about this. It would be rare. But as we progress, I think that's what the journey, that this has to become a norm, that we know why we are born. So that is which takes us towards life divine. And I think we have seen like these times, lockdown times and all that, we see like now so many organizations coming together on this path, of spiritual path, awakening people. There has been an awakening, but of course there can be more. But the darkness usually prevails. And we see this in story of creation by the mother, where it makes a little bit of sense that why it is like this. Yeah. And the problem is that now that I can see at least this much, that okay, I'm getting conditioned, what kind of a conditioning I want in my house. So I think there, if we are convinced, these little baby steps make a lot of difference. Like, once we were sharing, one of our friends who was sharing that as a child, their father who was connecting with the mother, he would make them recite by heart, whether they know the meaning or not, lines of Savitri. So she actually did like this, like you would be reading multiplication tables, and she's reading Savitri and learning. And then in the evening, he would come and he would ask those lines to their children. And now, when she's 50, 60 years old around, she says that now it feels like whenever I'm going through something challenging, it's like those lines, they like, come out from my consciousness and they're just in front of me. So that is also conditioning, if the conditioning has to happen. Yeah.
I think on the same lines, what the story that Dr. Reddy, Anand Reddy had shared with us, right? That when he was little, his father once asked him, who was also a sadhak, of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So he had asked him that, and he said it very beautifully in Bengali, that Anand, when you'll grow up, what will you become? And in this little boy wanting to impress his father, and he knew that doctors are considered very respectable. So he said, "Ke Baba, I'll become a doctor." So thinking that he'll be praised, that wow, wow, what a goal you have. And then his father, he said, just looked at him and said that, but there are already so many doctors. Why don't you become Anand? Like you're Anand, you become Ananda. So, I mean, what beautiful goals can we give to our children, to the world? And what goals are we giving? Like, I don't know if I know many people who would not swell with pride if their 4-year or 5-year-old would say that I want to be a doctor, right? It would feel like जीवन सफल हो गया कि मेरा बच्चा डॉक्टर बनना चाह रहा है. So again, that is something a bit collectively that we have taken up, right? That is wow, like the idealism of a goal that a child can have. And to tell your child that you don't have to be, there are already so many doctors, which is a fact. But you become Anand because Anand is less than being a doctor. There are more doctors and less Ananda, for example, and I'm comparing apples to oranges. Yes, but like if I would to say, like maybe my top 10 beautiful things I've heard, of happening, this incident, this experience would be one of them because it shows what we can be, right? What is our capability and how we can spread that, we can plant that seed that of higher wanting, like doctor, are aage jao, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. The greatest service to humanity, the surest foundation for its true progress, happiness, and perfection is to prepare or find the way by which the individual and the collective man can transcend the ego and live in its true self, no longer bound to ignorance, incapacity, disharmony, and sorrow. I think he also mentions something like this where he talks about like how to have global unity, the ideal of human unity, that without individual release from the ego, it is you forget about harmony of the nation, forget about it, because the building blocks are us individuals, and that's why we know that wherever people follow Mother Sri Aurobindo's vision of education, that's why psychic being, the center of our life, the central being, is considered so important, that we must not distort, we must cultivate, nurture, foster, so that the psychic remains in front and not become, bald and shelled, like happens in most of our distorted conditioning in childhood. Yeah. So I think this is very important because usually, as you were sharing, that we intend our children to be happy. That's why we say, okay, you earn well so that you can have more money, so that you can be happy. But we ourselves, have we ever thought about this? That okay, we may have all the money, we may have properties, wealth, bank balance, but where is my happiness and true contentment? If we have ever questioned that, and if we ourselves have at least started to begin to walk on this path of true contentment, I think then it is impossible that you can ask your child to get a degree for the sake of it. It's impossible. You can't do that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I thought you were done when I unmuted. So, when I was reading this line, the one that you have highlighted, the last four words were the ones that struck me the most, sorry, that no longer bound to ignorance, incapacity, disharmony, and sorrow. Again, when we talk about revelations, again and again, this knock that I am, ignorance is my slippery slope. Incapacity is what I am, disharmony is what I go towards. Sorrow is what I cling to. It seems that as if I'm being very negative. But yet, when I look at the way I perceive life, Mostly, if we talk about collective consciousness, I follow the collective because finding things out for me seems too much effort, right? So I'd rather be, ignorance is bliss. अच्छा बोल रहे हैं कर देता हूँ है ना. That is a slippery thing. I don't want to find the truth because then it has a lot of things coming away from the society. And where we were reading, right, that how I am thinking yesterday when we read that the golden boat, what, that how,
The
what was
dream
it?
boat. The dream boat.
Dream boat, sorry. That when I'm asked to get on that boat, right, I think about those small things, which don't seem small, that I'll have to give up. And I have to drop so much to actually, there's so much effort, it seems, to not just walk on the path that has already been walked on by millions and billions. So it shows, it's a fact that I'm bound to ignorance. I choose ignorance, although my mind would not agree to it. But if I look at myself actually, that is my slippery slope. Incapacity. One natural disaster, one volcano, one earthquake, one lightning strike, and you see how incapable you are, like how total no control you have over things, and yet there is something in me which wants to think that I am planning, I'm controlling, and yet I'm bound to this incapacity. I'm always putting walls around myself, right? I myself draw limitations and say, oh, this is the best I can do. Oh, after all, I'm a human being. What are you saying, right? I'm a human. Naturally, this is happening. So again, it's very reflected that how I'm wanting to just be limited when there's a possibility that I don't even know probably exists of me, merging with infinity or feeling that I have so much more possibilities. And again, disharmony, somebody says anything happens. The rush with which, the joy almost with which, the thrill with which I want to defend, I want to accuse, I want to reason. So peace is somewhere down. But I am right, or how could you, or what are they doing is more predominant in my everyday. And sorrow is like the best of all, that always I am wanting to go for joy, and yet
I think all of
again,
this actually leads to
yeah,
sorrow, no? Ignorance, incapacity,
exactly. Yeah,
disharmony.
this is
Yeah.
what I was about to say, is that my ignorance, my incapacity, my disharmony, which I am always attracted, I mean, kind of doing in my life, is leading to sorrow. But when I stand up and share, I want to say I want to be Ananda. And yet my actions, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my impulses are on a day-to-day basis taking me to ignorance. Are in ignorance, are towards incapacity, is towards disharmony. And when sorrow is there because of this, I cry out and say that why is life so hard? Why is it so challenging? Why can't things be peaceful? Why did God create this world with, it's so hard, it's so hard. So it's just wow, like how it's all written and bundled together. Thanks.
So it is by the pursuit of the eternal and not by living bound in the slow. I think we can, as you say, that write it down and paste it on our forehead and walls and everywhere. It is by the pursuit of the eternal and not by living in the slow collective evolution of nature. I think this is also very important because it's not that nature is an enemy of evolution. Nature is trying her best, if we look at ages that have passed, to evolve matter into a true form. That's what has been happening. stone to plant, plant to insects, to animals, to Neanderthal, now us. So it has been trying its best. That the process of nature, as mother says, that it's like, somebody who is like has abundance, like he throws all the raw material to create something, and then if you don't find it interesting, you just stumble it down, to stumbles, and then you create something. So the way of nature to create and recreate and new create is very extravagant, and it requires a lot of time and lots of effort. And that's where the human birth becomes so precious, that we can collaborate, what nature is already doing. So it is by the pursuit of the eternal and not by living bound in the slow collective evolution of nature that we can best assure even that evolutionary, collective, and altruistic aim our modern thought and idealism have set before us. So even if that is the thought that, oh, let's grow together, let's serve each other, let's have philanthropy, even if that is the aim, that too will be well served with this particular realization that the individual also and the collective, they yearn for the best and the highest, the eternal. But it is in itself a secondary aim. Now, this uh, altruistic aim that modern thought is giving, this is a secondary aim, he's saying. That charity and all that is not the primary aim. And that's why Mother doesn't put charity in the forefront of the spiritual path. But it is in itself a secondary aim. To find, know, and possess the divine existence, consciousness, and nature, and to live in it for the divine is our true aim, and the one perfection to which we must aspire. So I think this really serves as a very beautiful tha karke. It's like a reminder for us that whenever in our life things will become, oh my God, this is what happened, and oh my God, that person said this, that, oh my God, I lost property. Whenever things become too big, and not even like property and wealth, we don't even have to go there. In our head, things are happening all the time. Some mild comment came from somewhere, and our whole existence as if it's shaken because of that comment. There, if while shaking, I can remember that yes, I may be shaking, but I know that this is not where I have to be. And to shake it off our shoulders and again, you know, give our best, as Mother says, or Sri Aurobindo talks about, to unite with the true consciousness in us. And I think all of us right now, whoever is attending today, at least I can talk about these people, we are that much in our progress or whatever, the years that we have spent with Mother and Sri Aurobindo's words, that now it's time for a true practical shift in our consciousness. We have talked enough, we have reflected enough. It's not that we would stop reflecting and talking. We still continue to do so because it serves. But I think this practical shift in consciousness, where now it becomes impossible for you to go down the slippery slope consciously. I think that I feel that it's like an urgent need for those of us who have read enough, reflected enough, and talked enough. Otherwise, these words really feel that where am I, after reading 20 years, 30 years with Sri Aurobindo, or even lesser, doesn't matter. So I think and all the hints and clues are given in their own vision. There's nothing that one can add from beyond. They are the beyond. So to pick up those clues and hints and to walk that path of making a true shift in consciousness and to not think and feel from the brain lodged mind, but a consciousness which is deeper, either the psychic consciousness or a consciousness which is above mind, and make that our station. It feels to me very urgent. And I was going through his conversations, Sri Aurobindo's conversations with Pavitra, and I shared something on the groups a little while ago. But there it feels like as if I was really amazed to see how. So although he's writing it from memory, it said that in the beginning that most of it is written from memory, And yet, the direct hints and clues Sri Aurobindo is giving to him. I'll just read a bit of it. Maybe it will just resonate with what we just read. So it's a beautiful direct guidance that we have an example of here. So he says this is Friday, December 18, 1925. Your going back to France at the moment would be a defeat. You would fall off from the state of consciousness of which you have caught a glimpse. It could even be worse. Perhaps after a few years you would get over it, but in any case you would be missing an opportunity and failing in what you have to do. You bring a sincerity of heart in your search and the aptitude of your mind for learning, but your mental activity is harmful. I found this very helpful. But your mental activity is harmful. You must make your mind silent. A new consciousness is seeking expression in you. There are in India people, yogis, who can help you in this and give you a new birth. But there will be some difficulties in finding them, for you do not speak their language and they are often hard of access. This, however, is one of the solutions before you. This spiritual consciousness, which he says, which you will get while if you stay here, this spiritual consciousness will give you mukti, what we are reading, release from the subjection of all which is lower. Personally, my yoga would be finished if my goal were liberation. Mukti is only the first part. The second is to bring down the higher light into all instruments, to make them perfect, and to become the embodiment of truth. The universal truth and power will then act through you and by your instrumentation. It is true that people are more or less unconscious instruments of Shakti, but it is a question of remaining perfectly conscious. How clear and direct, that what you have to do first, mukti, release from this subjection, knowingly you're stepping back from the ego question, and then stationing yourself into the higher, so that that higher light comes and transforms the outer nature in the instrument. Conscious. And then he says that unconsciously we are all instruments of the divine, of course, who is not? But the question, he says, is of remaining perfectly conscious. And of course, it goes further on and on. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm just compelled to share something more, which was what we were reading here. In earlier, when we were reading upon release from mind and heart, he was talking even from the release of subjection to body. He was talking about witnessing. If you remember, become the witness. So here he says, December 20, 1925. There is in us a region which is above space and time, immobile, immutable at first. It does not participate in the waves of emotions and thoughts. The first step is to center one's consciousness in this region and keep it there. This is mukti. In us, beyond our personality, the Purusha is seen. So when we are talking about looking at the thoughts, looking at the feelings, and just taking the stance of awareness or the witnessing stance. So he says, this is mukti. Beyond our personality, the Purusha is seen with many attributes which are successively unveiled. First of all, he appears as the witness of actions, sensations, untouched and unalterable. Then he manifests as the giver of sanctions. He approves or refuses his consent to a movement of Prakriti. So this, I'm sure all of us must have felt this, that when we begin to look at thoughts and slippery slopes, then we, at many, many instances, choose not to step down. So that's what he says. Then he manifests First, you observe him as the witness, untouched, unaltered, not involved, right? Then you see that, oh, the sanction is given by default. So I can withdraw the sanction that no, I don't want to get involved here. So he says, then he manifests as the giver of sanctions. He approves or refuses his consent to a movement of prakriti, desire, thought, or even action. When such an order is given, as for instance, the refusal to take part in a certain emotion, all of us must have touched this space, I'm sure, that you refused to step into that entanglement of emotion. He says when such an order is given, the refusal to take part in certain emotion, though the past is yet strong, the being turns away from that emotion. So, in other words, what Mother says, stepping back. Then, so he's revealing that how the Purusha is successively revealed. Then, Purusha is the knower, and in him is the knowledge. This knowledge has several forms. The lowest is intuition. Lowest is intuition. For us, it's our highest. The lowest is intuition. Then comes the knowledge in unity. In any case, the senses are no longer avenues of knowledge, it comes directly. So, direct knowledge, what we in other words call gnosis, Gnosis, gnosis or vijnana, in other words. The knowledge by identity. Why do I know? I know because I am. So, I'm looking at an eagle. So right now, I am the one, this limited self, and I'm trying to understand the eagle. That's how we understand it. Look at it, observe it. So he says, then the Purusha is revealed that you become one. You are in that eagle, and that's how you know the eagle. Finally, Purusha reveals himself as Ishvara, the Lord, governing and acting through his instruments. He at last takes his kingdom in his hands. And then he, of course, goes further. Yeah. Yeah. Steps for us to make. Anything, anyone?
Now, while you were sharing, this visual kind of came that any time I'm actually able to say no, or when we say, becoming the master of yourself, maybe that is mukti, right? Like nature is saying this, your thoughts are saying this, emotions are saying this, and you're just standing and you're like just not indulging. That is mukti, right? Like somehow the definition of mukti is very big, or there would be simpler ones, but in general our perception is बहुत कुछ बड़ा है, और ये बड़ी बात ही है to have that control, but not to be a slave anymore. Mukti is freedom, right? And when I'm not being a slave to my emotion, thoughts, the collective, the darker entities like we just read, that is mukti. So very again, how it's said that when you can explain things simply, somehow that means that there is a better understanding of what we are talking about. And again, it's not about just words and mental imageries, but
Yeah, even I was startled
simpler
when
and
I just
simpler.
read it, how simply he just said that this is
Yeah.
mukti. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then he says that mukti is the first step. It's the initial step. Yeah. That's where the work of integral yoga begins, at the initial step. Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. There is a long way to go ahead, which is good because we have employment. We can't say that we have nothing to do. Any further comments? So we'll stop here. This is page number 359, the release from the ego. Take up the last bit again. Yeah. Okay, so then we can maybe stop here, if not anything further. Taking just one moment before we leave to just share this merit, collective reflection, reading, understanding with all the sentient beings. May our hearts be full, content, and maybe have lots of joy and progress in life. And may all of us get more and more strength to choose every moment, to become conscious every moment. Thank you.